It takes a lot of effort to bring you these stories, and I'd really appreciate your support. All I ask from you is a like and subscribe. Thank you.
If you're hearing this, you're alive. And if you're alive, that means you're still running, still hiding, still fighting. I don't know if anyone's listening. Maybe I'm just talking to myself. But in case I'm wrong, in case someone out there is still breathing, welcome to the end of the world. My name? That doesn't matter. Names don't mean much anymore. But if you need one, call me Austin. I found this station 3 days ago. The lights still flicker, the generator still hums, the mic still works. So I figured, why not send something out? A warning, a message, maybe even hope. I'm also recording this on a tape recorder I found. Maybe I'm just desperate to believe there's a future. Maybe I just want proof that I existed, that I was here, that I mattered. But let's talk about the state of the world. This world is no longer run by us, but the infected. Don't call them zombies. That makes it sound like some cheap horror movie, like something we can fight. We can't. In a matter of months, everything we knew, our cities, our governments, our way of life, collapsed. Those of us who are still alive, some call us lucky, but I don't know if this is a blessing or a curse. Some days, like today, I can't help but think about the past, about what life was like before the world came crashing down. Well, now that my memories have stirred, why don't you just listen to me ramble for a while? Not like you've got much for entertainment these days anyway. Let me tell you about where I came from. I grew up in a small town where nothing ever really happened. The kind of place where you knew everyone's name and they knew yours. My father, Richard, was a hard man, a mechanic who could fix just about anything with an engine. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't warm either. He believed in discipline, in hard work, and in keeping emotions to yourself. My mother, Linda, was the opposite. Gentle, caring, and always making sure my younger sister, Emily, and I had everything we needed. She worked as a nurse, the kind of woman who could soothe a child's scraped knee with just a soft word and a warm hand. But she was tired, always tired. Long shifts at the hospital, then coming home to cook, clean, and somehow still find time to ask about my day. I don't think I appreciated her enough. Then, when I was 15, everything changed. My mother got sick. At first, it was just fatigue, but soon she couldn't get out of bed. Cancer. The word hit our family like a wrecking ball. My father, the man who never cried, would sit in his truck for hours at night, gripping the steering wheel in silence. Emily didn't understand. She was only 9. I did my best to take care of her, but I was just a kid myself. When Mom died, something broke in all of us. Dad buried himself in work. Emily stopped talking as much. And me, I just drifted. Home didn't feel like home anymore. Without my mother, the house felt empty, lifeless. I couldn't stand being there, so as soon as I turned 18, I left town. I had no plans, no dreams. College wasn't for me, so I did the only thing I knew. I followed in my father's footsteps and became a mechanic. It was honest work, paid the bills, but that was it. Day in, day out. Fixing engines, changing oil, replacing tires. Life wasn't something to live, just something to endure. Years blurred together. When every day is the same, it's hard to remember much from that time. I kept in touch with my father and Emily, but our phone calls, once every 2 or 3 days, became once a week, then just a couple of times a month. You get the gist. My life had no meaning back then, just like now. I wasn't living, I was surviving. But then I met Jenna. She was different. She wasn't just beautiful. She was alive. Kind of person who made everything seem brighter just by existing. She walked into the shop one day, needing a simple oil change, and somehow we ended up talking for an hour. She told me she was studying journalism, that she wanted to tell stories that mattered. She asked about me, and for the first time in a long time, I actually wanted to answer. We started seeing each other. At first, I didn't understand why she liked me. I wasn't anything special, but she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. She made me laugh, made me think, made me want more out of life. For the first time since my mother died, I felt like I had a purpose. We spent weekends driving out to nowhere, just talking under the stars. She made me believe in something again. But life has a cruel sense of timing. Jenna's parents lived a few states over, and she hadn't seen them in a while. She decided to visit just for a week. I remember the day she left. She kissed me goodbye, told me she'd be back before I knew it. She promised. But a few days later, everything fell apart. The news reports were scattered at first. People getting sick, hospitals filling up, emergency broadcasts warning people to stay indoors. A lockdown was imposed. Then the updates stopped altogether. Only a repeat of the same government broadcasts over and over. This irked me a bit. I had a gut feeling that something was seriously wrong. Jenna and I were in contact over the phone. I told her multiple times that I wanted to come over there to be by her side. But she told me not to come, that she was much safer there and the infection hadn't spread there much. I believed her, and that was my biggest mistake. In hindsight, I know now that she just wanted to protect me, so that I survived. One day, like usual, I called her, but there was no answer. I tried again, and again. Nothing. My gut twisted in ways I'd never felt before. So, I packed what I could, took my beat-up old truck, and set out toward her hometown. As soon as I took out on the roads, I realized what a fool I was. The government tried to play off the infection as something minor, nothing major. Probably trying not to stir too much panic. But once I saw with my own 2 eyes, it was clear as day that the world that we all knew had come to an end. The roads were a nightmare. Abandoned cars, wreckage, bodies. I had to weave through debris, sometimes taking back roads just to keep moving. The further I went, the worse it got. Towns that should have been bustling were eerily silent. Stores looted, windows shattered, crimson stains on the pavement. And then I saw them. The infected. They weren't like the ones in movies. Slow and dumb. Some of them moved fast, too fast. Others just stood there, swaying, their milky eyes scanning for movement. I learned quickly to keep my head down, to move quietly. One wrong step, one broken bottle underfoot, and they'd be on you in seconds. By the time I reached Jenna's town, it was overrun. Fires burned in the distance. The stench of decay thick in the air. I gripped the wheel tighter, my heart pounding. I had come all this way. I had to find her. Her parents' house was on the outskirts, away from the main roads. The front door was hanging open, deep claw marks on the wood. I stepped inside, my hands shaking. The living room was a mess. Furniture overturned, crimson splattered on the walls. And then I saw her. She was standing in the kitchen, her back to me. At first, I thought, hoped, maybe she was alive. Maybe she had just been hiding. But when she turned, I saw the truth. Her eyes were empty, her mouth smeared with something dark. Her once vibrant face was pale, hollow. She wasn't Jenna anymore. She was one of them. I couldn't move. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't listen. She took a step forward, then another. A low, guttural sound escaped her throat. My Jenna. The woman who had saved me, who had given my life meaning, was gone. I whispered her name one last time, hoping for some miracle, some sign that she was still in there. But there was nothing, just hunger. Her lifeless eyes locked onto mine, a deep, hollow hunger reflected in them. Her once vibrant, laughing face was now slack, mouth parted unnaturally. Her hands, those hands that once held my face so gently, were twitching, stained with something dark. I wanted to call out to her, but the thing that stood before me wasn't her. It was a monster wearing her skin. I should have let it take me. For a moment, I almost did, letting go, giving up. It would be easier than living in this nightmare. But then, something inside me, something primal, took over, the will to survive. I wasn't ready to die. Not yet. Jenna lunged at me with an inhuman snarl. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I sidestepped, sending her crashing into the doorway. The sound jolted something back into me, the instinct to fight. I reached for the crowbar in my pack, and I did what I had to do. If anyone's listening, if anyone's still out there, you need to understand something. They're not people anymore. Not your friends, not your family, not your neighbors. Once they turn, they're gone. Whatever made them who they were, whatever made them human, it's gone. And if you can't accept that, you won't last long. I had to learn that the hard way. I lost someone I loved more than anything. And for a second, I thought maybe there was something left of her in there. That maybe she recognized me, but I was wrong, and I almost died because of it. I know it hurts. I know what it means to look into the face of someone you love and see nothing staring back. To feel that flicker of hope, to think just for a second that maybe, just maybe, you can still reach them. That maybe if you say their name, if you beg, if you plead, they'll remember. But they won't. They can't. The second they turn, they are gone. And if you don't act, if you hesitate, you're next. You have to take action. You have to make the tough calls. You have to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult it gets. Because in this world, one rule stands above all: survival. You can cry later. You can scream, break down, curse the sky. But in that moment, when it's you or them, you cannot hesitate. Mercy can cost you everything. Grief can do the same. If you can't do what needs to be done, then you're already a goner. You just don't know it yet. So if you hear me, if you're still alive, survive. Do what you have to do, and don't look back. I stayed there beside her for how long, I don't know. 30 minutes, an hour, 2. The world around me felt frozen, as if time itself had stopped, leaving me trapped in the aftermath of what I had done. My hands trembled, my breath was shallow, and all I could hear was the distant hum of the infected beyond the walls, a stark reminder of the world that now existed. But inside, in this quiet, lifeless space, there was nothing but silence, and the weight of loss pressing down on my chest. I was filled with a hollow, unbearable feeling. My world had shattered once again. The future I had once dreamed of, one where maybe, just maybe, Jenna and I could have survived together, was crushed, gone like everything else. As the agonizing realization sank in, the pain felt strangely familiar. An old wound being torn open again. My mother. It was the same when I lost her. The same suffocating grief. The same helplessness. The same moment where life as I knew it came to an end. And now, I was alone again. But even through the haze of sorrow, I realized there was still one place in the world I was meant to be. With my family. With my father and Emily. There was no one else left. If they were still alive, I had to find them. I had to get to them. They were all I had left. I muttered my last goodbye to Jenna, forcing myself to stand. The grief clawed at me, but I let it drown beneath a greater worry, the fear of losing my family, too. I knew they had to be in trouble. Emily had chosen to follow in our mother's footsteps. She had become a nurse, and working at a hospital in the middle of this chaos had to be the worst place anyone could be. The last time I spoke to her was before leaving for Jenna's. She had told me that the hospital had been boarded up, trying to prevent outside contamination. My father had been admitted just a few days before. Nothing serious, she assured me, just exhaustion from overworking himself. He would be fine, she had said. She didn't sound worried then. Maybe she was trying to reassure me, or maybe none of us truly understood how bad things were about to get. But that was a week ago, and now everything had changed. I fumbled for my phone, trying to call her, to call my dad. No connection, no ringing, just silence. Dread pooled in my stomach. I didn't know why, but I prayed. Prayed for their safety. Prayed that I wasn't too late. Then, without wasting another second, I grabbed my keys and drove. I didn't care about the dangers. I didn't care about the infected roaming the streets. I had to get to them. It was the only thing that mattered anymore. The roads were a wasteland of abandoned cars, overturned trucks, scarlet splattered across the pavement, shattered glass reflecting the dim, dying light of the sun. I took as few stops as possible, pushing forward, my grip tight on the wheel. Every second felt like an eternity. The miles between me and my hometown stretched endlessly, a road paved with uncertainty and fear. And then, as I neared the town, I spotted a familiar face. A man kneeling beside his truck, hastily changing a tire. His clothes were stained, his hands unsteady. Even in the dimming light, I recognized him. Uncle Jim. He was an old friend of my father's, a man I'd known since childhood. He wasn't really my uncle, but he had always been around, always treated me like family. For a moment, relief flickered through me. Someone I knew. Someone who could tell me what was happening. I pulled over, jumped out of the car. He glanced up, confused, not recognizing me at first. I couldn't blame him. It had been nearly a decade since he last saw me, and I wasn't exactly in the best shape. But as recognition dawned, his expression shifted. His face paled, his hands stiffened. "Austin." His voice was wary. "Son, what the hell are you doing here?" "I'm looking for my family," I said, breathless. "Emily, my dad, are they okay? What's happening to the town?" He hesitated, his lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes darting away. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "You shouldn't be here. Turn around. Go back." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What? No, I need to find them." "Austin, listen to me," he cut in, his voice urgent now. "The town doesn't belong to us anymore. It belongs to them. Go back, son. Go back the way you came." My heart pounded. What happened to my family? Uncle Jim didn't speak. He looked away, his face grim. I stepped closer, grabbing his arm. "Did they escape? Are they safe?" Still silence. And finally, he whispered, "I'm sorry." The words sent ice through my veins. "Your dad, he was in the hospital. He had a heart attack. He survived at first, but he was weak, son. He was hooked up to machines, keeping him alive." I swallowed hard, my throat dry as sandpaper. "And Emily?" Uncle Jim exhaled shakily. "She wouldn't leave him." My chest tightened. When things started going bad, the infection spread faster than any of us could react. The government kept us in the dark. We didn't know how bad it was until it was too late. The hospital was one of the first places to fall. I tried, son. I went there to get Emily out, but she refused to leave. She said she couldn't, that she wouldn't abandon your father, not while he was still breathing. I tried to convince her, I begged her, but she wouldn't budge. And I didn't have time. I didn't hear the rest. I turned on the engine, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. My mind was a blur, my body moving on instinct. I barely registered Uncle Jim yelling at me as I sped off towards town, towards the hospital, towards whatever nightmare awaited me. I didn't care. I had to get to them. I had to save them. I pulled up to the hospital. The engine hummed beneath me, the only sound in the eerie silence of the fallen city. I didn't need to step out to know. No one inside was alive. The building was swarming. Dozens, maybe hundreds of infected, stumbling through the shattered glass doors, crowding the entrance, dragging themselves across the pavement like mindless animals. Some stood still, twitching and sniffing the air, while others clawed at the broken windows, as if the hunt still consumed them even after the last survivor had been ripped apart. I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry, like I hadn't had water in days. I flinched. Suddenly, out of nowhere, my phone vibrated. It was the first real sound I'd heard in what felt like hours. With shaky hands, I pulled the phone out of my pocket and glanced at the screen. A message from Emily. My blood ran cold. For a second, I just stared. That wasn't possible. It had been days. The networks were down. How I swallowed hard and tapped the screen. The message loaded. I forced myself to read. "Austin, I don't know if you'll ever get this message. The phone's stopped working here for some reason, but if by some miracle this reaches you, I'll count that as a blessing. I'm sorry I lied to you. Dad had a heart attack. It wasn't anything minor, like I said. He wasn't in good condition. I didn't want you to worry because you would rush over here, putting your own life at risk. It's been a week since we last talked. 5 days since the outbreak hit the hospital. As I'm typing this, I can hear them scratching at the doors. It's only a matter of time before they get in. Almost everyone is gone. Some managed to escape, but I don't want to leave. I can't leave Dad. I can't leave this town. This life is all I've ever known. After Mom passed away, Dad and I weren't really living, just moving through life like ghosts, like zombies. But you got out. You found love. You found a life. I always envied you for that. I wanted to be happy for you, but deep down, I think I was just jealous that you could break free from this place while I was still stuck here, drowning in memories. By the time you read this, we'll be gone. But I need you to promise me something, Austin. Don't lose hope. Not because of us. Keep living. Find happiness even in this world. Live for both of us. We love you, Austin. I stared at the screen, the words blurring together as my vision swam. I read it again, then again. This message was sent days ago. By the time she hit send, I was probably at Jenna's town, completely unaware that she was spending her last moments trapped in that hospital. Trapped with Dad. Trapped with them. I lifted my head slowly, looking back at the building. The infected were everywhere, spilling out of the shattered doors, dragging their rotten limbs across the parking lot. There was no way anyone had survived in there. No way. She was already gone. Emily had known that when she sent this message. She had written it with the understanding that I wouldn't be able to save her, that no one would. I clenched my jaw. She had accepted her fate, but I couldn't. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to do anything except sit here and let this reality settle in. But what would that change? She was gone. Dad was gone. The only thing left of her was this message, this one final piece of her reaching out to me across time, begging me not to fall apart. I gritted my teeth and wiped my face roughly with my sleeve. She didn't want me to drown in grief. She wanted me to live. For her. For Dad. For myself. I took a deep breath, put the car into reverse, and drove away. I found myself driving to another city nearby. I wasn't even sure why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was just the need to keep moving, to put distance between myself and the hospital, between myself and what I had lost. But no matter how far I went, the weight of Emily's last words stayed with me, pressing against my chest like a heavy stone. The road stretched ahead, empty and endless. I barely saw another car that hadn't already been stripped for parts or left abandoned with doors flung open, remnants of people who had tried to escape. The world had fallen apart fast. By the time I reached the city, night had crept in, draping everything in shadows. The silence was what unnerved me the most. A city should never be this quiet. The only sounds were the distant groans of the infected and the occasional rustling of debris in the wind. Every now and then, I'd hear something. Movement. The scrape of feet on asphalt. A door creaking open. But I never stayed long enough to find out if it was another survivor or something worse. I moved carefully through the ruins of what used to be civilization, scavenging what I could. Cans of food, bottles of water, anything that could keep me going. The hunger gnawed at my stomach, but stopping for too long was a risk I couldn't take. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. I moved under the cover of darkness, slipping between alleyways, ducking behind abandoned cars, keeping my head low. The streets were a graveyard of the past, shattered glass, burned out vehicles, scattered belongings left behind, and panicked escapes. A child's stuffed bear lay face down in a puddle of scarlet. Someone's suitcase had burst open on the sidewalk, its contents spilling into the street like remnants of a life that no longer existed. It was lonely. The kind of loneliness that made me question if I was still human at all. I hadn't spoken to another living person in days. My only company was the distant groans of the infected, their unnatural wails echoing through the hollowed-out city. I started whispering to myself, just to remember the sound of my own voice. I clung to routine, checking supplies, rationing food, keeping my weapons close, anything to keep my mind from slipping. But I could feel it, the slow erosion of what I used to be. The longer I went without human contact, the less real I felt. Like a ghost drifting through a world that had already ended. I hadn't seen shelter in days, and the small rundown convenience store with its attached garage felt like a blessing. The windows were intact, the doors barricaded with overturned shelves and heavy furniture, as though it had once been someone's safe haven. But that wasn't all. It was the people. Sarah, Danny, and Jason. 3 survivors I met when I was close to giving up, when the weight of the apocalypse was starting to crush my spirit. At first, I felt relief. After losing everyone close to me, I thought I'd never have anyone to talk to again. Being with them, even just sharing a fire, made me feel human again. But over time, I started to wonder if they felt the same way about me. I wasn't sure if I was part of their group or just another person passing through. They were ragged, like everyone else, but there was something familiar about them, the kind of worn-down familiarity that made them seem real, human. They were just like me, trying to survive. Danny was the only one with a firearm, a scoped weapon, worn and scratched but looked well maintained. He was the first to point it at me when I entered. I had my hands raised, unsure whether I was going to be shot or spared. But he wasn't quick to pull the trigger. He studied me, then slowly lowered it when he saw the look in my eyes. Tired, desperate, not looking for a fight, just looking for a place to rest. Sarah was sharp, observant. She didn't trust easily, and I could tell she was always watching me, studying my every move. Jason, the youngest, carried a baseball bat like it was an extension of his arm. He rarely spoke, but I noticed how tightly he gripped that bat, how his fingers twitched whenever he heard a noise in the dark. We were a mismatched bunch, but I started to trust them. Sarah and Danny would take turns watching the perimeter while Jason and I scavenged for food. It wasn't much, but we made do. There were still a few cans of beans, crackers, and bottles of water hidden behind the counter in the store. They'd taken what they could, but it felt like a temporary arrangement. Maybe we were all waiting for something, an escape, a real destination, something more than just survival. We used my truck to keep moving. It wasn't the prettiest thing on the road, beat up, dented and covered in scratches, but it was reliable. I made sure of that. Regular maintenance kept the engine running smooth, and it had enough space to carry both people and supplies. We traveled from one town to the next, searching through abandoned neighborhoods, ransacked stores, and empty houses. The roads were dangerous, sometimes blocked, sometimes crawling with the infected, but we had to keep moving. At first, I was happy with them. Having people around again, people who could watch my back, who could share the burden of survival, it felt good. But there were moments when I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong. Maybe it was the way Sarah's polite conversations never went deeper than they needed to, like she was keeping me at arm's length. Maybe it was the way Danny would always eye my sidearm when we'd sit around the fire at night, cleaning our gear. I had a sidearm, silenced, top of the line, something I'd found in a small shop when I first made my way south. Ammo for it, too, which I kept in an old beaten-up pouch on my belt. I didn't use it much. I preferred my crowbar for the close-quarter stuff. The sound of a shot could bring unwanted attention, and the silencer, while useful, wasn't something I trusted for long-term survival. But I knew when it came down to it that this would be a lifeline. I tried not to think about it too much. I wanted to believe I'd found something real. That night, something felt off. I'd been running a fever for the past few hours, my body aching in ways I couldn't explain. I didn't know if it was from the stress, the lack of sleep, or something else I'd picked up along the way. That night, we had taken shelter in an old mechanic's garage on the outskirts of a small town. The place had clearly been looted, but the metal roll-up doors were intact, and it was better than sleeping out in the open. I found a corner near the back and collapsed onto a pile of old tarps, trying to ignore the relentless pounding in my head. The group had kept to themselves for most of the evening. It was a quiet night, just the sound of the wind rattling the loose sheet metal on the roof and the occasional groans of the infected in the distance. It was peaceful, at least for a little while. But when I woke up, everything was different. I didn't realize it at first. The fever had left me disoriented, my head foggy. I tried to sit up, but my body felt stiff and weak, the cold seeping into my bones. My throat was dry, and there was a strange taste in my mouth, metallic, stale. I blinked, trying to shake the haze from my mind. Then I looked around, and I froze. The garage was empty. Sarah, Danny, and Jason were gone. The barricades we had set up were pushed aside, the door left slightly ajar. My first instinct was to grab my crowbar, but I didn't need it. The truth was plain as day. They had taken everything. The small stash of food I had carefully saved, gone. The last of the water, the few remaining cans of beans, all the supplies, gone. They hadn't just left. They'd stripped the place clean and made sure I had nothing left to survive on. But that wasn't all they took. My sidearm. The silenced one I always kept tucked beneath my jacket. The one I never let out of my sight. Gone. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. They had taken it. They had taken everything, but something wasn't adding up. Danny's scoped weapon. The same thing he carried everywhere, like it was his lifeline. The one he always kept close, always pointed at people like a warning. It was still there. I staggered to my feet, fighting the dizziness, and picked it up. The weight felt off, heavier than it should have been. cold in a way that steel shouldn't be. My fingers fumbled with the mechanism, trying to load around, but the truth was obvious. It was useless. The barrel was bent, the internal parts damaged beyond repair. All this time, Danny had been using it as a prop, an illusion of power, a way to keep me and everyone else in check. I had been played. From the moment I met them, they had been watching me, studying me. Danny eyeing my gear when I cleaned it. Sarah keeping me at arm's length. Jason gripping his bat just a little too tightly whenever I was near. I had told myself I was part of their group, that I had found something real. I was wrong. Maybe they had planned to leave me behind from the start. Maybe they had just been waiting for the right moment. Or maybe the fever made the decision easier for them. Maybe they thought I was turning. That soon I wouldn't be me anymore. That it was easier to leave me to die than to check if I was still human. I meant nothing to them. And then, as I took a step forward, the final blow hit me. The truck. My truck. Gone. The same one that had carried us through towns. The one I had fueled up and maintained while they slept. The one I never let any of them drive. They had waited until I was too weak to stop them, and then taken it as if it was always theirs. I wasn't just left behind. I was stranded. It wasn't just the loss of my supplies or my gear that hurt. It was the betrayal. The realization that trust was a luxury in this world, that survival wasn't about loyalty or friendship. It was about taking what you could and leaving the rest behind. I wasn't just left behind, I was stranded. And if I stayed there, I wouldn't make it. I had no food, no water, no gear, nothing but the clothes on my back and Danny's prop. My truck was gone, and with it, my best chance at survival. The fever still clung to me, my head swimming, but I forced myself to move. I had no other choice. I spent the first few hours hiding. The infected didn't come in swarms, not yet, but I could hear them in the distance, the low groans echoing through the empty streets. I stuck to the shadows, moving only when I had to. An old store across the road still had its doors shut, and when I slipped inside, I found just enough to keep me going. Half a protein bar, a bottle of warm soda, and a rusty pocket knife. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. I knew I couldn't stay there. Traveling on foot was risky, but I had no other option. I stayed off the main roads, sticking to back alleys and wooded areas whenever I could. I moved at night, keeping low, avoiding open spaces. When I spotted infected, I waited, watched, learned how they moved. I realized they weren't as fast as they used to be. Decomposition slowed them down. Some barely reacted unless you made noise. The second night, I slept in the trunk of a rusted-out sedan, curled up with my jacket over me. The third day, I found a pond and drank until my stomach cramped. It wasn't clean water, but I didn't care. Survival wasn't about comfort, it was about making it to the next day. By the fourth day, my luck turned. I was creeping through a residential neighborhood, searching for supplies, when I spotted it. A car. A beat-up old sedan sitting in a driveway, untouched. The windows were intact, and the body wasn't wrecked. And when I peered inside, my heart nearly stopped. The keys were still in the ignition. I didn't ask why. Maybe the owner had been dragged out before they had the chance to drive away. maybe they had abandoned it in a panic. It didn't matter. All that mattered was that I had wheels again. The tank was nearly empty, but it had just enough fuel to get me moving. I drove until the needle hit red, then I siphoned gas from other abandoned cars. I scavenged what I could, food, weapons, anything that would keep me going. I stayed on the move, never lingering in one place for too long. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The world was different now. Towns were nothing but ghostly remains of what they once were, their streets littered with the bones of the past. The infected were everywhere, their numbers growing as time passed. And then, somehow, years slipped by. 5 long years. In that time, I became a ghost myself, drifting from place to place, surviving but never living. I met people along the way, but I never stayed. Trust wasn't something I could afford anymore. The world had taught me that lesson the hard way. And now, here I am. All this time, I've been looking for a safe haven, a place free from the infection. But everywhere I've gone, the infection's always there, creeping, spreading, consuming. No matter where I ended up, I never found the peace I was searching for. The world, as it used to be, is gone. There is no safe place. Not anymore. There's a part of me that still hopes to find a refuge, even though the rational part of my brain tells me it's just a dream. That hope, the one that kept me going for so long, is starting to fade. But then again, what else do we have if not hope? The people I meet along the way, they're just like me. Survivors. Some are willing to help, others just trying to survive in their own ways. I learned early on to keep my guard up because trust is a dangerous thing in this world. It's not easy to let anyone in, especially after what happened with Danny, Sarah, and Jason. The truth is, people change when the world breaks like this. You can't trust anyone to be who they used to be. I've seen it, lived it, learned it the hard way. But still, I communicate with people when I can. I need to know the state of the situation out there, what's happening in other parts of the world, because sometimes a scrap of information is all you have to go on. People are valuable, even when they can't be trusted. I've stumbled upon some interesting things during my time on the road, bits and pieces of knowledge that don't always come from books or research, but from the experiences I've had and the conversations I've had with other survivors. Some of it is useful, some of it just speculation, but it's all a part of the puzzle. One thing I learned early on from survivors I met in abandoned towns was the origin of the virus. Turns out, it all started in a place most people probably never heard of, the Tomohon market in North Sulawesi, Indonesia. I know, it doesn't sound like much, but it was ground zero for the outbreak. I remember hearing it from a couple of old traders who had passed through that region just before the world began to collapse. They said it started with the market's notorious reputation for selling exotic meats. The kind of meats you wouldn't even imagine eating. Rats, bats, even snakes. Pretty much anything that moved, they would sell it. And that's where the virus came from. It makes sense when you think about it. With all that wildlife and the conditions they were living in, it was only a matter of time before something like this would happen. But, of course, people travel, And when the virus hit Tomahan Market, it didn't just stay there. It spread quickly, faster than anyone could have imagined. It made its way to major cities, carried by travelers, businessmen, tourists, anyone. And in a matter of a month and a half, it reached the U.S. By then, it was too late. The virus was everywhere. The world was riddled with it, and no one had the slightest clue about how to stop it. I remember when there were talks about a cure, people held on to that hope for as long as they could, hoping for a miracle. There were rumors, whispers about scientists working on a solution, government agencies pulling together to find a vaccine. At first, it felt like there was a glimmer of hope on the horizon. Maybe it wasn't too late. But as time went on, as the world continued to fall apart, it became clearer that the cure was a fantasy. Governments collapsed one by one, their leaders either consumed by the virus or hiding away, too afraid to lead. The infrastructure crumbled, and any hope of a cure went with it. Now, the only thing that keeps us going is survival. A cure is a distant memory, something people talk about like an old fairy tale. No one's waiting for a miracle anymore. We're all just living one day at a time, doing whatever we can to survive. I've seen the way people have adapted to this new world. Everyone's out there on their own, just trying to scrape by. There are no more governments, no more orders or systems in place. We're all alone now. There's no one left to help us except ourselves. Sometimes it feels like the world has turned into a giant scavenger hunt. The infected walk among us, and the living are just as dangerous, fighting over whatever scraps of food or shelter they can find. The infected are everywhere. There's no hiding from them anymore. They've become as much a part of this world as the air we breathe. It's like the whole world has been infected. Not just by the virus, but by the fear and desperation that follows it. The infection has a strange power. It's not just about turning people into monsters. It's about turning the whole damn world upside down, making everyone question their morals, their survival instincts, and their humanity. There's no more compassion out here, just survivors. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe we've all lost something. Maybe we've all forgotten what it was like before the world fell apart. I've been talking for a while now, maybe too long. If you're still listening, maybe you're looking for something. Hope, a warning, or just another story to pass the time. Either way, I figure I owe you something for sticking around. Maybe it'll bring me some good karma, or maybe it's just my way of paying it forward in a world that's taken so much. Survival isn't luck, it's a set of rules. A collection of hard-earned lessons that keep you breathing when everything else is trying to hunt you down. The world isn't what it used to be. And the things that mattered before, they don't mean a damn thing now. What matters is staying alive, simple as that. Rule number 1, trust no one. It's harsh, but it's the only way to make it. People will deceive you, turn their backs on you, or leave you behind when it matters most. The world is every man for himself now. Don't let your guard down for a second. It's not even about being paranoid. It's about staying sharp. Every encounter could be your last. Learn from your mistakes and keep your distance. Anyone who seems too nice, too helpful, is a potential threat. And those who seem too dangerous, well, they might just be the ones who understand the new world better than you do. Rule number 2, avoid cities. They're graveyards now. Too many bodies, too many traps, too many things lurking in the dark. Cities are where the infection spread the fastest, and they've become the worst places to hide. I've seen entire cities fall into chaos, people fighting over the last scraps of food, their last hope draining away with every passing day. The infected swarm in droves, and the survivors. They're just as dangerous as the monsters. You don't want to be anywhere near those places, no matter how promising they might seem from a distance. Trust me, if you can see a city on the horizon, keep walking in the opposite direction. Rule number 3, weapons. Guns are loud, but sometimes you need them. You can't take down a horde with just a bat, but remember, noise attracts attention. That's why I always keep a silent weapon nearby, something that doesn't draw too much attention. Crossbows are great for that, accurate, quiet, and you can recover your bolts if you're careful. Sharp objects, crowbars, even a baseball bat, whatever you can use without drawing the infected in. Even a scratch from the infected is enough to turn you into one of them. Don't risk it. Stay clean. Stay silent. Rule number 4. Stealth is your best friend. Moving quietly, sticking to the shadows, and never revealing yourself unless absolutely necessary. This is how you stay safe. You need to know how to move like a ghost. The infected are drawn to sound, to movement. If you can keep a low profile, you'll survive much longer than anyone else. I always make sure to move slowly, methodically. Avoid running unless you have to. If you're in a tight spot and need to escape, running might seem like the best option, but remember, it's not the fastest thing that survives. It's the smartest. Wait for the right moment and don't give away your position. Rule number 5. Always have a backup plan. Things go wrong. They always do. And if you don't have a plan B, then you might not make it. Whether it's an escape route, extra supplies, or a safe place to hide when the infected start closing in. Always be ready for the worst. I've learned this lesson too many times. Never rely on one plan alone. Sometimes you have to think on your feet, improvise, but when you've got a backup plan in place, it gives you a lifeline when everything goes sideways. Rule number 6. Ration your resources. Food, water, medicine, they're all in short supply. The more you use, the less you have. I've seen too many people fall apart because they didn't manage their supplies properly. You can't afford to waste anything. If you find food, stretch it out. Same with water. One bottle might last you a day or two if you're careful. Medicine, too. If you're injured, don't just pop a pill for every scratch. Use what you need, but be frugal. The last thing you want is to run out of something important when you need it the most. Rule number 7. Trust your instincts. There's no guidebook for survival anymore. The rules are different now, and you have to adapt quickly. But through it all, you can always trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, if a situation seems off, listen to that gut feeling. It saved me more times than I can count. Your instincts will tell you when to stay, when to run, when to fight. Don't ignore them. Rule number 8. Stay off the beaten path. The roads are filled with danger. Most survivors know the main roads. That's where the infected tend to linger. Stick to the woods, the back roads, the places no one else thinks to go. You'll be less likely to run into crowds of infected or other survivors looking to take what you've got. Plus, you might come across hidden resources that others missed. I found abandoned farms, old cabins, and even some untouched caches of supplies just by avoiding the main roads. Rule number 9. Don't stay in one place for too long. The longer you stay somewhere, the more likely someone or something will find you. The infected aren't the only things you need to worry about. Other survivors can be just as dangerous, and sometimes they'll come looking for you, even if they don't know you're there. You need to keep moving. Keep on the move. Find a place to rest, but don't settle down for too long. You never know when the danger might show up. Rule number 10. Don't forget who you are. It's easy to lose yourself in the chaos of survival. The infection, the danger, it can consume you, but you can't forget who you were. You can't forget your values, your morals, the person you used to be. It's tempting to let the darkness take over, to let anger and fear guide your every move, but trust me, it's not worth it. Holding on to your humanity, even in the face of all this, will keep you grounded. It'll keep you from becoming one of the monsters you're fighting against. Rule number 11. Look for signs of hope. It's hard, but you have to keep your eyes open for moments of hope. It might be something small, an old journal with stories of a place where the infection hasn't spread. A message written on a wall that suggests there's still life out there. Even in the worst of times, there's always something to cling to. Maybe it's the memory of your family, the thought of a better life, or just the simple desire to make it through another day. Whatever it is, hold on to it. Rule number 12. Never stop learning. The world has changed, and so must you. Everything is different now, from the environment to how you interact with others. Learn from everyone you meet, and always keep your mind open. Take note of the new ways the infected behave, how they react to different sounds or environments, and learn new survival tactics from other survivors. Adaptability is the key to survival. Surviving isn't about strength or luck or even intelligence. It's about being prepared for anything, knowing how to act when things go wrong, and keeping your wits about you. If you can do that, you'll last longer than most. But the one thing I've learned above all is this: survival is a choice. Every day you wake up, you make the choice to live. And that's all you can do. Just keep making the choice to keep going. If anyone's still listening to this, whether it's through a radio or some recorder, you're probably wondering why I'm giving when I clearly don't trust people. Why I'm still babbling on like this when I know how this story ends. Well, it's because I'm not going to make it. Two days ago, I was bit by one of them, and you know what that means. I've been feeling it. The chills, the fatigue, the fever. Every passing hour it gets worse. I can feel it in my veins, crawling through my body like a poison, slowly turning me into something I've been running from. I don't have much time left. Probably just a few hours. Soon, I'll be one of them, wandering around in a daze with nothing left in me except hunger. But that's not why I'm talking into this thing. You're probably wondering why I'm still bothering to record my thoughts when I know I'm done. When I know the inevitable is coming. It's because I have to leave something behind. Something that says I existed. Something that says maybe, just maybe, my life meant something, even if it was just for a short while. Maybe someone out there can learn from my mistakes. Maybe it'll help someone else survive a little longer. I don't know, but it's all I've got left. I wasn't a good person. I wasn't a good son, a good boyfriend, or a good brother. I didn't appreciate the people who cared about me until it was too late. I let everyone down. They all sacrificed themselves so that I could live. And now, with just a few hours left, I can't help but feel the weight of that. I can't help but regret it all. I wish I'd done things differently. I wish I had been better. But I can't change that now. I can't go back. I can't fix the mistakes I've made, the people I've hurt. All I can do is leave this behind, and maybe, in some twisted way, make it mean something. I thought I still had time. I thought that if I kept going, kept searching for a safe haven, I'd find it. I thought that maybe, just maybe, I could find my family again. But the infection, the chaos, it doesn't care about your hopes or dreams. Time doesn't wait for you. I've spent months running, searching for something that doesn't exist anymore. The world is a graveyard, and I'm just another body waiting to join the rest of them. I've got to be honest, this isn't how I thought it would end. I thought I'd be one of the survivors. I thought I'd be the one telling stories about how I made it through the apocalypse, about how I kept my humanity intact. But I was wrong. I wasn't strong enough, not quick enough. The infection's too fast, and I'm just too human. And now, all I can do is leave behind my story, my thoughts, my failures. Maybe it won't help anyone, but it's all I have left. So, if you're out there listening, if you've made it this far, remember this. Survival isn't just about fighting. It's about the choices you make. The people you trust, the things you hold on to. Don't waste time. Don't let regrets pile up, because trust me, when the end comes, you don't want to look back and realize you missed your chance to do better. As for me, I know what's coming. I'm not afraid of it anymore. I don't have time to be. I'm already starting to feel it. The itch in my skin, the burn in my veins. Soon, I'll be one of them. And then, there will be nothing left but an empty world. But, for now, I'll keep talking. I'll keep leaving something behind, even if it's just my voice. Maybe it'll mean something, maybe it won't. But it's the last thing I can do. Goodbye.